We are live. Tell everyone your name, please.
Jodi O'Malley.
Jodi O'Malley. Many of you may recognise Jodi, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. Talk first of all about when you first woke up to something is very wrong.
Well, I first woke up to something is very wrong in February of 2020 when I heard that we were going to get on board with this 2 weeks to slow the spread, and it was going to be a global thing. And for me, all of my teachings in church as a young girl came rushing through, and I literally looked up to God and said, I'm supposed to pay attention to this part, right? And I was given this discernment to choose faith over fear at all costs.
And what were you doing at that point? What kind of a nurse were you, and what were you working on?
So I was a nurse in the float pool department. I was a critical care nurse, so I could pretty much go to any area in the hospital. ICU, OB, med surge, ER, and then my hospital recognized my critical thinking and assessment skills and asked me to be hospital supervisor of the federal hospital. It's called Phoenix Indian Medical Center. It's under the branch of HHS, Health and Human Services, and the Indian Health Services, IHS, runs it.
Okay, so talk us through what you saw.
Yeah, so, in the beginning, I just knew the fear, right? It was all fear, it was all panic, and it was a 24/7 shoving down your throat fear, which is propaganda, because propaganda is only one thing that you could do, right? It's like, you have got to be fearful. You have got to put a mask on. You have to isolate. You have to listen. And then the virtue signaling came. And what was happening in the hospital was we stopped treating people. We essentially told everyone to stay home, right? And not come into the hospital. We shut down surgeries. We stopped the kids from going to school, right? I mean, businesses were shut down, just everything all around was just fear. And I knew as a nurse that public health policy does not dictate having people, healthy people, first of all, isolate with the sick. And then also too, not educate ourselves. I mean, because we know for children, it's extremely important that they're in school. A lot of time, abuse situations are apparent there. They have people coming out and talking with the kids. Nurses or teachers can recognize if there's something going on in a child's life. I mean, just overall, this whole agenda was just demonic.
So you were working in that 2020.
Yeah.
Did you stay there when the vaccine came out?
Yes. So the vaccine rolled out in December of 2020. And I like to tell people, I look at this in phases of what we saw in terms of sickness at the hospital. First, it's important to realize that the Native Americans are the highest affected population in the world. They lost 7 years off of their lifespan in virtually 2. Okay, going back to numbers in the 1920s of how long they're going to live. And then at that time, wait, what was the question? I'm sorry, Polly.
We were talking about,
yeah.
We were talking about, before pre-jab, you saw a certain kind of sickness, and then after jab.
Right. So we did not have our first wave, I like to call it, of COVID admissions until July and August of 2020. Virtually the hospital was dead. We shut down surgeries, clinics, everything like that. And then the next wave I saw was late December, January. And that was when we injected this population. We were the first ones to be able to receive it. Many, many people lined up for it, to get it. And then I started noticing that there were people that were injured, right? I didn't really look at it so much in that light because as nurses, we're not trained. We get training in school about VAERS, but when you're working like in areas of med-surg, ICU, ER, we're not recognizing vaccine injuries. I like to take people back to like critical thinking. If you're a nurse listening to this, imagine this. Every single year we do learning modules. We're having to do the same ones over and over to prove that we're still competent in that area. How come we never had any on VAERS? How come the government didn't push out to the millions of health providers to say, hey, listen, we are going to roll out an experimental technology, mRNA, never before used on humans, and then we're going to inject it with never before injected biologic agents. So we need you guys to recognize if there's any safety signals we need to be aware of. They never did that. So that is when I knew they didn't care to know. Right? And then you also had the nurses and the doctors that took this injection. And so therefore, they're not wanting to recognize that there's anything wrong with it. So they don't even want to go down that path of thinking. And when my coworker was coerced to get the injection, okay? She did in July of 2021. She had worked in the COVID unit, essentially, ICU COVID unit, for this entire time. And then 3 of the girls went and got injected in the middle of the night before day shift came in because the pharmacist had to throw it away because it was no longer, it was going to be expired. The 3 nurses went to go get this injection. 2 weeks later, she shows up in the emergency room saying that she just doesn't feel well. All of her vital signs are normal. She's not requiring oxygen. And then a couple of days later, she's put on remdesivir. Then a couple of days later, now she's intubated and she passes away. This is 2 weeks post her first jab. Nobody was talking about it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, this is the problem that we have in healthcare, is that they don't want to recognize or realize what was happening, so nobody was collecting the data. That's how I knew the government didn't care. They just wanted a shot in every arm.
So when did you decide you were going to do something about it, be a whistleblower? When did that happen?
When that happened with my coworker, she came in and she asked me, she said, hey, what are those meds that you've been talking about? And I said, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. She said, yes, I want that. And then I went into just nurse mode. I was hospital supervisor, so I was essentially running the hospital. And I spoke to her nurse and I said, she wants to try this. Do you know anything about this med? And she said, no. And I said, well, look it up. And then she did, and she calls me up and says, yeah, she's not contraindicated. We should try it. And then she went and talked to the doctor. The doctor had said that it's controversial. So I called the doctor and the nurse into my office and respectfully said to the doctor, doc, controversial or not, it's not a reason not to practice medicine. Would you be willing to look up some evidence? And I gave her FLCCC website, and she looked it up. The nurse calls me and says, she's going to order it. And I was like, praise God. A couple minutes later, she calls me back and says, pharmacist denied it. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, the pharmacy won't fill it. So I called the pharmacist into my office, and at that point, Polly, was my very first recording. I set my phone up on the counter and I pushed record because at that time I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But I knew that I had this spirit that she was going to die. And, it just was one of the hardest things. And I thought to myself, I'm going to have to make sure that I'm hearing what she says. And that was my reason for initially recording. But then very shortly thereafter, we had a 15-year-old with bilateral blood clots in his lungs after the injection. And I took report to cover a nurse for break. And she said, oh, there's a 15-year-old with bilateral PEs. He's not requiring oxygen. He's good. Probably go home tomorrow. And I said, okay, well, is he overweight? And she said, no, he doesn't have any comorbidities. And I said, was he injected or vaccinated? I used at the time. And she said, I don't know, but I'll be back in 15 minutes. And I'm like, my God, nobody's asking the questions. You know, we had another nurse, young nurse in her 20s, develop POTS and had to wear a cardiac monitor for a month. I mean, nobody's recognizing that this is the injury. So what had happened after seeing that, recognizing that we just completely violated the ethics of our profession and the patient's Bill of Rights by removing the advocate from the bedside, not providing early treatment, not honoring patients' wishes, right? All of these things, I thought, you know what? Oh, then I had a 30-something-year-old come into the ER, and I got that on film with the doctor telling him that you have myocarditis, pericarditis, and congestive heart failure, probably due to the vaccine. And I was just like, it just seemed like God had answered. God had said, here you go. All I need you to do is push record. And I pushed record and I uploaded it to James O'Keefe's organization.
And so you went out and you went viral.
Yep.
And what was your life like after that?
What was my life like? Well, I've gained 50 pounds. That I tell people, like, food has been my comfort.
Have you been attacked?
No.
That's good.
No. I received 99.9% love. And, you know, people just wanted the truth. They were hungry for it. They were thirsty for somebody to tell them. You know, I mean, after that, I did get 18 complaints against my nursing license, and the Arizona State Board of Nursing ordered me to undergo a formal ethics evaluation, which I was deemed clear of all wrongdoing. So my license is intact. I'm winning First Amendment lawsuits against me. The pharmacists try to come after me and, and prevent me from ever saying the pharmacist ever again. And a judge was actually close to awarding it to her because it was video. It's so crazy, but you know, now we're in a lawsuit, almost in the hearing phase with a federal judge for HHS for my whistleblower retaliation, where I'm claiming that they a danger to public health and safety, waste, fraud, and abuse. Oh my gosh, there's 5 things a whistleblower can blow the whistle on, and I got all of them. So we're there finally.
And are you working now? Are you able to?
Well, yeah. So my work kept me around for 15 months until the federal judge twisted their hand and said, I'm not deposing the same people twice. So figure out what you're going to do with her. And they fired me 15 months later. And then a few months ago, a physician that I worked with in the ER reached out to me and said, what are you doing now? And I said, I have the Nurses Out Loud. I've been speaking, you know, just doing all the things. And he said, the ER needs you. Do you want to come back? And I said, and not to my original hospital. And I said, oh my gosh, I would love to, but you know, I just can't follow protocol like that. You know, it's just against my ethics and my integrity. And he said, they don't require masks, they don't require injections, and it's a great hospital. So now I'm back to ER nursing too. Yes.
So you're all back.
And I'm back. And here's the other thing. You know, I'm a fly on the wall, essentially. I mean, my managers that hired me know that I'm a federal whistleblower, but I respectfully asked them if we can just keep it under wraps, because I just want to be Nurse Jodi. You know, I just want to be me and let people judge me on the type of nurse I am before they're going to find out. There's a few nurses that have recognized me and seem to be keeping it quiet so I can continue on. And so the other day I was in the break room and a couple of nurses, I was out on at the nurses station at like 3 a.m, and I just started talking and talk about injuries. It was a new nurse. And I said, I wonder how the ethics portion of nursing school went. And she's like, what do you mean? And I said, how did they get over the whole idea of coercing you into an experiment? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, the COVID jab, you know, I said, or COVID injection. I said, it's not, it's still experimental. It's not approved. You know, how did they get to that principle of nursing ethics? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah, That's kind of a problem. And I said, because there are people that are injured. And then another nurse that was standing there said to me, do you know my story? And I said, no. And she's like, I know I was injured. And I said, really? And she goes, off of that damn jab. I was one of the first people to sign up to take it because I wanted to do my part, you know? And I go and I get injected, and 30 minutes later, I'm at the Jeep dealership, and my parotid started swelling, and then my throat started swelling, and I was having an anaphylactic reaction. And I go back to the ER because it was close, and I tell them my throat's closing. They have to intubate me. The next day, you know, and she goes in, and I'm broken out in hives throughout my body. And she said the next day, you know, I'm talking to them after they extubate me, and then talking about the vaccine, you know, me just getting injected right prior. And they said, well, you don't know if it's that. And see, and that's the issue, Polly, is because no, we don't know it's that. But it is our legal, ethical, and moral obligation to report safety signals, because where there's smoke, there's fire. That's how Pfizer had to say that myocarditis can be a side effect, right? That's why they went out. And that's the thing that was lacking, is that people thought if they filed a VAERS report, if they even knew about VAERS, that they had to determine causation. But that's not our job to determine it, you know? So that's another huge issue.
Okay, so what do you say to potential nurses watching right now that they want to tell the truth, they've seen some bad things, but they don't want to lose their job, and this is what we're hearing the whole time. I would come and talk to you, but I can't, sorry.
Yes. The same thing that I told them. I said, listen, when I was speaking out in 2020 and 21 in the hospital, I knew that it was my ethics that was going to get me through it, and evidence-based practice. Remember, nurses, we're supposed to follow evidence-based practice, which is using the best available science that you have, right? And there's a lot of science out about masks, about injuries. I mean, go to children'shealthdefense.org. You'll get a plethora of it. Highwire, right? I mean, there's so many places that you can get this information. And if you're speaking, you know, with science backing you up and studies, it doesn't have to be CDC approved, right? It could just be from other authors and resources and stuff. NIH has, you know, studies on there about, you know, injuries and whatever, anything that you want to talk about, ivermectin, remdesivir, mask, it's all there. So talk. That's our job to do. We're supposed to educate, and we're supposed to have discourse. You know, that's how science is driven. And if you are finding that you absolutely do not want to be a part of this system, because I know there's so many of you out there that are protesting against safe staffing, or against travelers making more money than you know, those types of issues. Just recognize what's been done. This was all a planned catastrophe, essentially. We went from a nursing shortage to a nursing crisis. What did they think was going to happen when they refused to honor our Constitution, our autonomy, our ethics, and our exemptions? You know, but there's other programs out there. I'm working very closely with Remnant Healthcare, which can provide the patients for you to help treat. And Functional Nurse Academy, Melissa Schreibfetter's organization, that she just got accredited to be a functional medicine nurse specialist with her organization, and that's outside of CDC. You know what I'm saying? So there are options. Follow us on Nurses Out Loud. We're speaking 5 days a week, giving you education and resources.
So nursesoutloud.com, what is it, website?
Yeah, so AmericaOutloud.news is the platform. It's the one that McCullough is on. So if you follow him, that's where our show is, and it's called Nurses Out Loud. But we're also on iHeartRadio under the America Out Loud banner. and on all the podcast platforms, and just type in Nurses Out Loud, 3 separate words, and you'll find us there. And then you can go to the episode website, and then you can find information for me and the other nurses on there.
All right, good. Now, some more advice, please. What's your advice to not the nurses, not the medical profession, the people? Because we're still getting reports of hospital protocol deaths with remdesivir. Apparently hasn't gone away. A lot of these pictures of people who claim their loved ones were killed with remdesivir and vents and God knows what else. If people don't want to go to the hospital anymore.
That's right. That's right.
All right, so what is your advice? What do you have to say to us?
Well, my advice, number one, is do what you can to promote better health for you. And that is mind, body, and spirit. Sunshine, water, proper nutrition, nutrients, food. Eliminate the sugar out of your diet. It's highly inflammatory. Take ownership of your own health, number one. Number two, I think it's very important to get an advocate. And not just your mom or your husband or somebody that thinks like you, right? And Remnant Healthcare offers that. That's the amazing thing. All of the people in Remnant Healthcare have to be trained in functional medicine as well. So it's amazing. And then spiritually, I mean, number one is spiritual, right? Is because when you recognize, no matter what your view is, okay, no matter what it is, I'm sure everybody feels an element of good versus evil happening in the world, and for me, it's biblical. It's a biblical time to be alive, and it's an exciting time to be alive, and especially to be called according to his purpose, and that's how I feel that I submitted to the will of God. I asked for forgiveness. I said, Father, take this cup from me. Your will be done and not my own. And he has guided me, and I live a life of joy and peace, and I'm getting that demon of overeating right off of my back. I just did spring cleaning in my house, cleared out all the cobwebs, which that's what Passover is about. It's that time of year, so look at the spring. No matter where you're at in this country, it's a beautiful time of the year of rebirth and just looking at life in a different way. Don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive, and take care of that. I do offer a private membership community called the Truth Movement, where I bring in experts like McCullough, artists, nurses that are doing things, and I'm gearing up to do a 3-month workshop with my health coach from Chemical Free Body, and then we also talk and have book clubs on my book, Rare Courage, and I read a chapter and then we all discuss, and it's just a wonderful way to build up your confidence so you too have the courage to walk in your calling in a community.
But amazing. Thank you for taking the time to be. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that was it. I'm kind of getting good at this.
You're really good at it. Okay, so say bye to everybody.